Hello, and welcome to the Transportation Planning Capacity Building video series. This video series is sponsored by the Transportation Planning Capacity Building Program, jointly administered by the Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administrations. I'm Ben Turpin, and I'm pleased to introduce Larry Anderson, Transportation Planning Specialist at FHWA's Office of Planning, Environment, and Realty.
Hello, everyone.
In this video, we'll provide an overview of the federal funding lifecycle for transportation planning activities administered by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. Introduction.
The Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration provide federal funding for state departments of transportation, metropolitan planning organizations, and local governments to plan for and build safe and efficient transportation systems. State DOTs either dispense the funds directly or pass the funds through to sub-recipients, including MPOs and local governments, to carry out their federally required transportation planning processes. Planning activities assist the state DOTs and MPOs in preparing transportation plans and programs. That is, the planning, engineering, and designing related to public transportation and highway projects. Planning activities are part of the decision-making process in providing for construction, reconstruction, and improvement of our transportation system. This can include projects on highways and bridges on eligible federal aid highways, routes, and the administration of special purpose programs and investments in projects eligible for the federal transit programs. More concretely, some of the outputs of the planning process include transportation plans to improve safety on a corridor or a plan to develop a bicycle network.
As a planner with a state DOT or MPO, this video will help you to identify relevant federal regulations and resources for more information, know what funding is available for planning activities, know the steps involved in using federal funding from pre-award through closeout and audit, and describe your role in the process of using federal funding for planning activities in your state or MPO.
The information in this video is provided by the Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administrations and is generally applicable to state DOTs and MPOs. However, please note that state DOTs can vary in the way they do business with FHWA and FTA. Throughout this video, we will point out areas which may differ between states. Be sure to check with your state DOT for how they conduct business.
Funding overview. Before we get into the process and life cycle of transportation planning funds, let's start with a quick overview of their purpose and intent.
The most common forms of transportation planning funds provided by FHWA that you may be familiar with are State Planning and Research Funds, or SPR funds, and Metropolitan Planning Funds, or PL funds. SPR funds are authorized under Title 23 of United States Code, Section 505, State Planning and Research. PL funds are authorized under Title 23 of the United States Code, Section 104F, Transfer of Highway and Transit Funds, and are meant to fund activities that carry out the provisions established in 23 U.S.C. 134, Metropolitan Transportation Planning.
The most common funds for transportation planning activities provided by FTA that you may be familiar with are Title 49 U.S.C. Section 5303, also known as Metropolitan Planning, Section 5304, also known as Statewide and Non-Metropolitan Transportation Planning, Section 5306, known as Private Enterprise Participation in Metropolitan Planning and Transportation Improvement Programs, and 5307, Urbanized Area Formula Grants. These funds are meant to support the economic vitality of an area and support the transportation system to increase the safety and accessibility of the system for all users.
The role of an FHWA division office and an FTA region office planner consists of review, approval, and oversight of the funding that state DOTs and MPOs spend on the transportation system. As a planner at a state DOT that receives these funds, you will be working directly with the FHWA division planner or the FTA region planner. Planners working at MPOs who receive federal grants are sometimes encouraged to work exclusively through their state DOT, who will coordinate with FHWA and FTA. In some states, MPO planners are included in a three-way conversation with the state DOT and the federal agencies. Be sure to check with your state DOT and follow their coordination and communication guidance, processes, and/or protocols.
Work programs. Now let's quickly touch on the purpose and intent of planning work programs and how they relate to the use of federal planning and research funds. Next, we'll be ready to walk through the life cycle of federal transportation planning funds.
A planning work program is a statement of work that accompanies a grant application for FTA planning funding. For FHWA planning funds, the planning work program is the grant application. Work programs are annual or biannual statements of work that document the transportation planning activities that a state DOT or MPO will undertake over the next 1 to 2 years. The work program documents the proposed work and gets submitted to FHWA and FTA for review and approval. The federal agencies determine which planning activities are eligible and reimbursable. As far as FHWA and FTA are concerned, there are two different types of work programs. State Planning and Research, or SPR work programs, are developed and used by state DOTs to communicate how their agency intends to use SPR funds for statewide transportation planning activities. Unified Planning Work Programs, or UPWPs, are developed and used by MPOs to communicate how they intend to use Metropolitan Planning Program funds.
All transportation planning activities funded by either SPR or PL funds from FHWA or Metropolitan Planning Program or State Planning and Research Program funds from FTA must be included in the SPR work program or UPWP. In addition, states and MPOs must include all planning-related activities that are fully or partially funded by FHWA capital funds, such as Surface Transportation Block Grant funds, unless that work is programmed and administered through the Transportation Improvement Program and/or Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. Be sure to check with your state DOT and follow their guidance, procedures, and processes. Process.
There are 7 phases to the Transportation Planning Fund life cycle: pre-award, work program development and transmittal, FHWA and FTA review, federal approval and authorization, monitoring and oversight, closeout, and audit. Let's go through each of these steps. Please note that every state approaches activities within these phases a bit differently, so please be sure to check with your state DOT about how they conduct business throughout the funding life cycle. Now let's get started.
During the pre-award phase, you should become familiar with the background materials that are available for review. It is important to know the laws and regulations about requirements and eligibility, any FHWA division agreements with the FTA region and/or your state DOT, and any recent corrective actions prompted by reviews or audits. For example, Memoranda of Agreement, or MOAs, between FHWA and FTA establish the roles and responsibilities of both agencies in the planning process. Be sure to coordinate with FTA, FHWA, and any sub-recipients to set priorities and a schedule. Discuss with the awarding agency any planning initiatives or topic areas that the FHWA division and/or FTA region offices believe might be appropriate for additional emphasis. You should discuss with them the schedule for reviewing the draft work program, how long it should take to address comments, and when the final work program should be approved. If you're at an MPO, look to your state DOT for guidance about what you will need to consider with respect to schedule, priorities, and requirements.
Well in advance of development and transmittal of the planning work program, state DOTs and MPOs alike should develop a timeline and define process steps to ensure that the work programs are developed and transmitted to FHWA and/or FTA for review in a timely manner. This process is to ensure that everything in the work program is eligible and allowable, which we'll go over in the next section. For UPWPs, before an MPO formally adopts the work program, FHWA divisions ask that they send a draft version to the state DOT, FHWA, and FTA. This gives those agencies an opportunity to make comments and allows the MPO a chance to revise anything that might not be eligible or allowable under federal law, statutes, and regulations. After all agencies have had an opportunity to make and address comments on the draft work program, grant recipients should feel free to submit the final document. Be sure to check with your state DOT, as the specific submission process may vary from state to state.
After work program transmittal, FHWA and FTA begin the review process. The federal agencies will work together to review the submitted work program for three things: eligibility, allowability, and level of detail. A review for eligibility ensures that the activities listed in the work program are consistent with the applicable statutory requirements. A review for allowability ensures that the costs listed in the work program are consistent with the provisions outlined under 2 CFR Part 200, Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards. The agencies also ensure that the level of detail of the work program provides sufficient information in the task descriptions and funding summary to identify who will be producing the work, the deliverables, timelines, and cost estimates, including the federal, state, and local share.
The next phase of the life cycle, approval and authorization, begins when the federal agencies have reviewed the final work program and determined that it complies with statutory and regulatory requirements. Before states and MPOs can begin incurring costs, they need two federal actions: UPWP or SPR approval and project authorization. Approval of the work program is determined based on the final document submitted by the state DOT or MPO. If you worked with the federal agencies on a draft version of the work program before officially submitting it, this step should be relatively quick and easy. Project authorization to proceed with the work program represents a contractual obligation between FHWA or FTA and your agency. Authorization requires that the funding be available to cover the federal and non-federal share of the authorized activities and efforts. For FHWA, the Financial Management Information System, or FEMIS, is the platform through which funds are authorized, tracked, and ultimately reimbursed. For FTA, the Transit Award Management System, or TRAMS, is the platform through which funds are awarded, tracked, and monitored. Each state DOT manages access to FEMIS and TRAMS a bit differently, so be sure to check with your agency for information on their processes and protocols.
Following authorization is the monitoring and oversight phase. This phase covers the time period addressed by the work program. During this phase, the state DOT or MPO can begin work on the planning activities described in the approved work program. The state DOT is responsible for monitoring all activities that it performs, as well as any performed by any sub-recipients, such as MPOs, to ensure that the work is being managed in accordance with applicable federal and state laws, statutes, and regulations, and within approved timeframes. The state DOT is also responsible for submitting regular performance and expenditure reports to the FHWA Division Office.
Once work begins, sub-recipients, like MPOs, are also responsible for providing regular and timely performance and expenditure reports to the state DOT. State DOTs will follow their own internal control procedures before approving expenditures and reimbursing sub-recipients for them. State DOTs and MPOs are encouraged to work together to decide if a work program needs to be amended. This usually happens at regular checkpoints, such as when a performance report is submitted. If the agencies decide that a work program does need to be amended, the state DOT must provide an updated work program to FHWA and FTA, who will review and approve the amendment and update the authorization. The work program may be amended at any time during the performance period. After the end of the performance period, before the monitoring and oversight phase can conclude, grant recipients must provide a final performance report to FHWA and FTA for review. This should happen within 90 days of the close of the performance period.
The closeout phase occurs after the expiration of the performance period for the work program, when the work program activities, products, and tasks are completed and associated costs incurred have been reimbursed. To initiate closeout, the state DOT must submit a final voucher and supporting documentation to the FHWA Division Office or FTA Region Office for review and final acceptance.
The final phase in the life cycle is the audit phase. All state DOTs and NPOs that expend over $750,000 of grant funding in a single year are required to do a single audit. A single audit is intended to provide assurance that the grant recipient has adequate internal controls in place and is generally in compliance with program requirements. State DOTs should contact their FHWA division office for details about the auditing process, since it may vary from state to state.
Summary: planning for, applying for, programming, and accounting for federal funding to support transportation planning activities in your state or MPO can be confusing if you're unfamiliar with the process. The process is in place to help you solve transportation problems in your community. Adhering to this process not only ensures that federal funding is being used to maintain a safe and efficient transportation system, but to help state DOTs and sub-recipients manage the funding efficiently and effectively. For more information about this topic or any other topic in this video series, please visit the Transportation Planning Capacity Building website at planning.dot.gov. Please note that except for the statutes and regulations mentioned, the content of this video does not have the force and effect of law and is not meant to bind the public in any way. This video is intended only to provide information and clarity to the public regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies.